my last lecture, I had talked about evaluation of teaching and evaluation of faculty. The idea was how to improve teaching. The first two lectures was on, I believe, TVI, tutored video instruction. It was a way of teaching in which an ordinary teacher who is a subject matter expert can teach in a normal classroom, but that same lecture can be converted into very effective teaching module. The second two lectures were about ELNetCL, electronically networked lifelong learning. Again, the same kind of thing. Ordinary lectures recorded and played in a particular kind of way so that they become extremely effective. These are unique examples of how, without any effort on part of the teacher, a lecture can become very effective. The next two lectures, 6 and 7, I believe, were on how to change the way of teaching. Today what we are going to do is to complement these lectures with from a different angle. Assessment and evaluation are important parts of teaching. But we are now going to look at assessment and evaluation to improve teaching, rather than for the sake of evaluation or giving grades only. Let's look at it. We'll only look at certain aspects of it. The organization of the talk, that means some of the points I'll be touching, some will be in depth, some will not be so much depth. The first one will be between the difference between assessment and evaluation. In my teaching career of nearly 50 years, I've found a lot of faculty, very, very good faculty, do not know the difference between assessment and evaluation. It doesn't matter too much, but it helps to know the difference. So we'll look at that. Grading decisions and evaluation. The basic issue is, why do we sometimes use grades A, B, A plus, B plus, rather than marks only, 73, 79, 49, 45, instead of using marks only, why do we use grades? Next issue is summative and formative assessments. Some of you may not have heard about it. Some of you may be very, very familiar with it, but we'll discuss nonetheless. Particularly the formative assessment, because the formative assessment really is a way of teaching, rather than giving grades by giving numbers or marking students with that this person is better than that, because that formative assessment is primarily for improving teaching and also not only teaching, the improving individual weaknesses of students. And the final one is test items as a question paper. We shall use the word test item to be specific rather than question or question paper. This is a terminology which is used in education quite a lot. And additionally, we'll talk about supply and selection type test items. Most of you probably know it, minor point, but we'll talk about that. These three are particularly important. Item analysis is particularly important, and we will look at some of the issues of item analysis. The next one is tip for setting good MCQs. In fact, I will not talk about it too much in detail, because that will take at least 2 lectures itself. Use of rubrics is the final one. So that's something we'll talk about. Assessment and evaluation, the difference. Assessment is a process of gathering data to measure degree of attainment of course goals. Look at it carefully. It's saying it's the process of gathering data to measure degree of attainment of course goals. We are teaching a course with a specific set of objectives. We should, at least, we should set the objectives very, very clearly, that at the end of the course you should be able to do this. These are course goals set. And assessment is the process by which we measure the data, how much of the course goals have been achieved. Assessment techniques may vary with goals. It could be class test, quiz, it could be an assignment, it could be viva, term paper, oral presentation, case studies, lab report, portfolios, practical theory and examinations. You can clearly see that so many varieties are possible to measure the course goals, depending on what the course goals are. So, each of these, a class test is an assessment technique, a quiz is an assessment technique, assignment is an assessment technique. So, these are different assessment techniques. They are not evaluation, they are assessment. Evaluation, on the other hand, is assessment data quantified for each student for all relevant assessments. Example, you could say, a particular institution can say that their, let's say, viva would be allotted 20% marks. Their lab reports would be given 5%, 10% marks. In that fashion, they can allot different percentage of marks for different assessment, and then carry out the assessment and give the marks, add the marks total, and the total marks gives a sense of evaluation. If the total marks are now chalked together, you might find somebody's got 90%, somebody's got 95%, somebody's got 45%. This is the final assessment. This is the final evaluation. That means we are telling who is better than who and to what extent. This is evaluation. If necessary, data can be normalized for different tests and assessment methods. Many of you may have the experience that in a class, large class, maybe more than one faculty is teaching that class. I have that personal experience at IIT Delhi. 3-4 of us have been teaching the same course. Now, if we teach the same course and at the end of the semester we bring in the marks given by each teacher, and we find that the range of marks of one teacher varies from, let's say, 30% to 95%. Another one is varying from 30% to 70%, and another one is changing from 30% to 60%. So, the range can vary substantially depending on who's teaching and who's marking. Somebody may be marking very strictly, somebody may be marking easily, with ease, and as a result the range of marks can change. In such a case, a normalization has to be done, because there is no reason why one particular class would get very high marks compared to another class. So, a normalization is to be done, and this is done fairly frequently. If necessary, value judgment made based on criteria, norm, relative position amongst peers. Finally, when you give marks, we can give marks or we can evaluate on the basis of criteria which is or norm referenced. Relative position amongst peers. That means our purpose could be that the marks should differentiate between the ranking of the students. Who is better than whom? By how much? If this is the purpose, then a comparison among students comes in the picture. Somebody might get 77%, somebody might get 75%. So the major purpose of evaluation in that case is ranking among students. Who is better than whom? This is the idea. So this is called norm-referenced evaluation. Within the class, that means if somebody is a topper of a class of a particular batch, that person may not be the best of all batches. He may be best in one batch but not best of all batches. The other one is criterion referenced. That means you set that at the end of the course the student should be able to do this with so much accuracy. And when you give the marks, you actually do not care who is better than whom, but you check how much of those tasks each of the students can do. If somebody can do all the tasks, that person gets the highest. Somebody can do half the norms, then that person gets 50% of the marks. So that's criterion referenced. There's no issue of comparison between students. Now, why do we use grading rather than marks only? Many institutions use grading. Of course, some also institution marks. The reason is very simple. If we do an analysis of our own skills and the way we set question papers, the way we give marks, we find that there is a great deal of differences between one teacher and another teacher. We ourselves, we are at different moods at different time. So marking somebody 75 and another person 76 would mean that 76 is better than 75, definitely better than 75. But this may not be true, we know that. So instead of marking where the difference between students is 1 mark, what we decide that we would bunch them. We would say A plus A, B plus B, C plus C, D. That means maybe a bunch of 7 groups, 6 groups or 8 groups, usually 7 groups. So that the difference between groups are less. There are still problems when somebody gets A and somebody gets B. The junction is always a problem, and that solving that problem is a more or less a personal decision. So, but we will leave that for the time being. How do you solve that problem? But it's possible to solve. What I have done personally is those 2 papers I check second time, third time, and find who, if each of the persons deserves exactly the marks given. If in that case, they will remain B and C or A and B. Otherwise, they are merged. That's marks, this is grading. Basically, grading is to ensure that our mistakes are less. Norm reference and criteria reference I have talked about a little bit earlier. What do they mean? Where are they used? Test items as a question paper, supply and selection type test items. Some terminologies basically. Norm referenced is within a class. That means if a batch of 1987, or let's say a batch graduating in 1987, somebody may be the topper. A batch graduating in 1984, the person who is the topper may not necessarily be worse than the batch of 87. Although both are toppers, they are from different batch. So, this is what we call norm referencing, that within a particular batch, who is better than whom, not amongst all batches. Where are they used? When we decide that it is important for a company or an institution to know who is better than whom in a particular batch, the marking or the grading would be norm referenced rather than criteria referenced. That means who is better than whom is what we are looking for that particular batch only. And criteria referenced is very clear, that we have set out right in the beginning what are the criteria for marking. That means what should they be able to do at the end of the test. Therefore, when we do the marking or when we do the assessment and evaluation, we will test everything which is set out, almost everything that has been set out in the beginning. Who is better than, meaning what are the things that each person is supposed to do. So, the range of questions would be quite large, and that would be criteria referenced assessment, and that obviously is much better than norm referenced. Test item as the question paper, very simple. Test item is a particular question in a question paper. A question paper consists of a large number of test items. What we call a question is what we are calling here test item. Okay. So, test items are part of a question paper. Supply and selection type test items. Supply type test items are those where the students have to write down justifications, solve problems and write essays. These are supply type test items. Whereas selection type test items is the name, as the name suggests, you are marking, which is tick marking, choosing from a test item. So, a multiple choice question is a selection type test items, whereas writing a problem, solving a problem is a supply type test item. There really ought to be a balance of supply type test item, selection type test item in a paper. Assessment, a little bit more about criteria reference. Criteria referenced performance measured against specified criteria. It is not who is better than whom. It is, can you do this or can you not do this? That is performance measured against specified criteria. Items may have any FV. FV is a terminology we will define a little later, called facilitation value. Facilitation means making things easy. How easy or how difficult it is measured by facilitation value. So, items may have any facilitation value, means that items could be, or a particular question in a question paper or a particular item in a question paper can be pretty easy or pretty difficult. The range need not be restricted into easy type question or easy type or difficult type questions. All criteria to be measured. If we have set out in the beginning that these are the criteria, some of those could be tough, some of these could be less tough, and the range of criteria could be quite wide, then in criteria referenced assessment, all the criteria to be measured. Narrow focus, which means that if we are teaching a course and the course is spread over a period of time, then in a particular class we have decided that these are the criteria we will be teaching today. These are the topics will be today, and these are the criteria. In which case, the narrow focus would mean that a small range of criteria covered in the class on that particular day would have to be measured. That's narrow focus. Large sampling size. Naturally, if we have to measure all the criteria, then for example, if we say that you have to be able to spell 500 English words with 4 letters each correctly, then I cannot give test of only 5 English words with 4 letters to check the capacity of the students. If I have said 500, then I should give at least 50 or 60 words to check the accuracy. Otherwise, my sample size is too small and it would not work. And if it is criteria referenced, then competency certification is perfectly possible, which means I have right in the beginning said these are the things which the students are going to be able to do, and at the end of the course we can easily certify that they can do that or they cannot do that. So certification of that particular small part is perfectly possible. Norm reference, as we have already said, placement within a group, who is first, who is second, who is the topper of the class, who is not the topper of the class. But remember, norm means norm of that particular batch. There is no certainty at all that somebody who stands first in a particular class will stand always first in other classes also. They could be quite different. So first, second, third of different batches have different competency. These are measured with test items which have high DI, medium FB. High DI means DI stands for discrimination index. We will talk about a discrimination index a little later. And medium FB, medium facilitation value. Again, facilitation value we will talk about a little later. They have wider focus. They would not be restricted to only a few questions. They will be restricted to larger number of questions. So that's norm referenced. For assessment, both are necessary. The criteria referenced and norm referenced both are necessary. Summative and formative assessments. We look at the purpose, use, types of test items, take home and open book assignments, various kinds of summative and formative assessment. Formative assessment is something which we are really supposed to do daily. We are teaching a course, so we have daily routine. That means on day 1 we have planned to teach something, on day 2 we have planned to teach something else. Like that, the whole course is divided into small chunks. And we really should ideally check how much the students have learned on each day. There is no point giving a feedback at the middle of the course or at the end of the course, because by that time the students may have learned many things wrong and the feedback is not appropriate at that point per time. Immediate feedback is an extremely important issue. So in formative assessment we give feedback instantly, but we also use formative assessment for many other things. Again, a little later we will talk about formative assessment. The types of test items which are used in formative assessment are quite different from those which are used in summative. Summative assessments basically mean the certification at the end. All the formative assessments, all the criteria reference, norm reference, formative assessments, everything has been done throughout the semester. And the sum total of that, when quantified and ranked, is the summative assessment. That means it is the certification. A, B, C grades, first, second, third, fourth in the class, these are summative assessment, summative evaluation. So, the result of formative assessment and summative assessment is summative evaluation. This summative evaluation can be what we call the final examination, and it could be different types of test items can be used for that, including multiple choice questions, and take home and open book questions can be done. Just by the way, I myself have used take home and open book questions many times in the past. Take home questions are rather tough to solve, and open book is less difficult, but is a good way of testing out the students' concepts. Okay, so that's summative and formative assessment. So what we have done so far, we've talked about two types of tests, summative and formative assessment, and we have talked about that the formative assessments are ones which not only test the students' learning, but a very, very important thing, the purpose of today's lecture or the next lecture is how formative assessment can be used to assess our own teaching. This is the most important part of formative assessment. Formative assessment assesses not only the students' learning, not only the quality of teaching, but also our ability to teach. Summative assessment, on the other hand, is only a final grading. Finally, summative assessment at the end for final grading, wide range of facilitation value. That means we would not look at that this is a question, difficult question, or this is a simple question. This would mean facilitation value is limited to either small number or large number. A facilitation value would mean a facilitation value of 0 would mean a very, very difficult question. Facilitation value of 1 would mean a very, very simple question. High DI items, high discrimination index items. Again, discrimination index is basically the questions which have high discrimination index. They are able to differentiate between a good student and not so good student. And norm referenced, you already discussed that it is only for a particular batch of students. Items to include representative sample of course objectives. If we have, let's say, 10 chapters in a particular course of a particular book, we should not set papers only from chapter up to chapter 6 or chapter 7, leaving all other chapters. So the wide sample of the course, the items to include representative sample of course objectives. May need normalization before evaluation, as we have already said, that it is possible that some teachers have lenient marking, others have difficult marking, so a normalization may be necessary at times. We'll look at the remaining part in the next lecture.